Hi, my name is Norbert, and this is the third episode of the Kotlin Basics series. In this episode, I would like to introduce you the functions in the Kotlin language. So let's have an example where I want to print user information, and so I will have a first name, I will have last name. Let's define those already. Let's say I have an email. So all these are strings so far. And print those. There is like a nice shortcut what you can use. Just type salt and v for variable, and then you can choose which variable you want to print. So the first one will be first name. The second will be last name. And maybe the email address. So when I run this one, everything perfectly fine. Everything works. But let's imagine that, okay, this is one user information. So this is the first user, or user one, just to be. And then you want to do the same thing for a different user. So usually what's an anti-pattern, or what you shouldn't do, is like copy paste with Ctrl+C, Ctrl+D, and then you say like, yeah, this will be user 2, and then just like adding a few twos here. Of course, that's already a mistake. You should use refactoring. Like if you do Shift F6, you can just rename it, and you see that the printout is already changed, or say changed at the same time. So okay, it looks a little bit dummy, but I just want to demonstrate. Maybe you can put user 2 here, or something like this, and I will copy paste this one back to here. So when we have this, of course, let's change this one, and the mic will have, I don't know, mic@gmail.com. But the issue with this one, let's say that we want to store the age of the user. So every time you have a user, you need to add a new value here, or a new variable, and then adding here. So I'm 30, mic will be like, I don't know, 55. Again, you see that it's like kind of error prone, that you need to add for each user one by one. Of course, printing those, you need to add here and here also. So you will have age, and then to the other one also. Just let's do that one to demonstrate the issues. And then I will have age 30, age 2, again like 55, and this should be age 2. So when I have this one, then again you will see a printout. But instead of doing this one, because every time if you see something like this, then immediately you can think that this needs a function. The function should contain the logic, which shouldn't be repeated. So the whole idea that like every time if you want to change this and this, then if it would be in the function, then it's enough if you change it in one place. So to creating a function, you need to say fun. Like working with Kotlin is fun, so that's why the name comes from. But of course, this is just a shortcut for functions. And then you need to give it a name. So let's print user details, and then parentheses. In this one, we will specify parameters, and then you need to have the body, what will be executed. So we want to print this information, or sorry, let's copy this one, and then we see how it works. So this is the logic, kind of what we want to execute, and I just move that. And then what we need here to call the function. Calling a function is just typing the name and then hit enter. So now instead of having everything in one function, like in main, in the main entry point, now we separated into a smaller function. Running this one is still the same thing. So of course we could do the same thing for this, creating a new function, but as you can see there is like duplication here, which we can reuse. And then we're gonna like learn about arguments or parameters. In this case, the parameters are like what's changing between calling this function. So for example, if we could like pass the first name, last name, email, and age into this function, then we could call it from here also. So the idea is that we're gonna pass, we will have this information here before, we're just gonna pass these into the function, and the function will use it. So to define an argument here, what you need to do is just specify the name, what's going to be the parameter, and the type of it. So the first name will be a string. Noted that you don't need to put any var or val here, because that's not really necessary. You cannot really change this value. So it's like by default, it's immutable, it's val. So now this one is fixed, and then we could do the same thing for the others. Also, just to learn a new shortcut here. Of course, if you hit Alt Enter, then it will give you like options, and then you want to have a param, and then it will just move it to the top, and then immediately this one is working. So do the same thing for the other. And now we created 4 parameters. Now let's a little bit refactor this, because this is not first name 2 anymore. This is just simple first name, last name, email, and age. And now this one is, of course, this age is not a string. We want to have an integer. So you see that like Kotlin doesn't allow you to, because the age is an integer, and this one wants to have a string. So the parameters have to have the same time when you call it, otherwise it won't compile. So again, this should be an integer in this case. And now everything works. Let's run it and see what it's print. So now we can use this function in this place also. But if I just move back, and then I just need to change these and the age. Just removing a few comments. So what we have here, we created a function where we specified the logic, what we want to do. In this case, printing the user information. And then here we're just going to use it. But let's say that I want to do a print for a new user. So the first name, and you see IntelliJ helps you, okay, what's the order here? So let's say that I have a John. The last name will be Miller, and the email will be like empty because I don't know that one, and the age should be like 40. Let's say that's mandatory. So as you can see, I don't need to create these properties or create these variables. If I'm only just like passing those immediately, I can just specify it right here immediately. So now you can see that we have a John Miller here also. But let's talk about this email, because we have an issue with this one, or a little bit at least. That what if I don't know the email address for that user? Providing an empty is kind of okay, but one issue that like if you have multiple users and you don't know the email, then you need to always provide an empty one. But in Kotlin, you can specify default arguments That means that if you don't have a value or someone calls the function but doesn't provide a value, you will use the default value. And then providing a default value is like an equal sign. Just to demonstrate what's this one, default@gmail.com. And then if I remove this, the issue here that I can only have so the issue here that I need to, the default argument should be in the last position. So just let's change or swap the email and the age. Just for a second. I could do like this. So this is perfectly fine if someone does this, that you copy paste and then switch manually, but then you will see that like all these are like compiling anymore. So it's better if you want to change the order of these params, you can actually right click, say refactor, and then you can say change signature, Control F6. This will show you the name of the function, what's the return type. I will talk about it in a few seconds. And then these are the parameters. And then you can just say like, okay, instead of email, or for email, just move it down a little bit. So the age should be the third. Okay, you can do a preview. How will it look like? Or sorry, the preview says like, okay, what's gonna change? And then just do refactor. And now you see like the age is the third and the email is the last parameter. And then all the usage of those are like swapped. So I can just do what I wanted or what I intended to do, create a default value for this. I'm just gonna type something to see what's the print here. So if I run this, nothing really changed because we always provided an email. So because in this case it was empty, in this case it was Mike, and this is mine. But if for Mike, let's say that we remove this value, then you see this is perfectly fine. There is no compilation issue, and I can run it. And for John, we will use the default at gmail.com. This is kind of useful if you have always like an optional parameter in this case, or you don't really expect to people just pass dummy values because like the signature, this is the signature, expect to have something. So it's always good to use a default, but as you have seen, you need to be at the last position. In Kotlin, you can just actually like make it visible that okay, this is the first name, this is the last name, and this is the age. And then if you, this is called named parameters. If you use names or named parameters, then you actually the order doesn't matter anymore. So you can just move the age here and leave the first name, last name as there. So this is kind of nice feature if you have, I don't know, 10 parameters, let's say, and then you don't really know the order of those, or because you get string, but you can actually name it and then it will be more visible. Let's say that we want to, instead of creating or printing first name and last name, it would be nicer to print the user full name. So what we would like to have, so this is what we want to have, or just name, we don't really usually name, call those full name. Just so we want to do something like a full name here instead of this, and the full name will be, let's say we want to create a new function for that one. So again, get full name, and in this case we're going to return something. So we would like to somehow put the first name plus a space, for example, and the last name. And then you already see that, okay, that in order to get the full name, we need to provide the first name and last name as argument or parameters. So I will just copy paste those. Sorry, you don't need to have a semicolon. And then now you see something new, that this says that there is a type mismatch. I want to return from a function a string. So I'm creating something, but I didn't specify what's the type here. But Kotlin says this is a returning unit, because by default, if you have a function and you don't specify anything here as a return type, then it's by default it's a unit, which means that you're not really returning anything. As in this case, in this print function, the return type of unit, because you're not going to produce anything, you're just printing or you're executing something. But in this case, I want to return something. I want to return a string in this case, create something new. So I can just specify, okay, this function will return a string. Just use that one for now. So get full name. I will specify the first name and last name. Let's delete those. Let's see, I'm just gonna refactor this name and run it. So for each usage what we had, we replace the full name or the last name and first name and last name with the full name. So you can see that I don't really care about how it was used. I just specified the new functionality with the new function, and then all the usage are printed nicely. And then this is an example how to use a function from another function. So okay, now we learned that you can actually specify return types. So this can be like any type what you know in Kotlin. And when you return a value, you can assign it to a variable. And the next thing what you see, yeah, concatenation. I mean, sorry, we learned this one, that of course not just printing, just to creating a new string, you can actually use string templates. And because usually in Kotlin, if you have one line function, you can actually simplify a little bit, because Kotlin is smart enough to see this is a string, so you actually don't need to specify it for Kotlin. You can simplify it by move it like this. So just instead of specifying the type, maybe I will just keep or duplicate this one, then you see the difference. So again, instead of type and body, you're just gonna specify equal sign, and then I will just call it short, and then you see the difference. Of course, you can do the same thing with this one. I think IntelliJ can help, that you hit an Alt Enter on the body or in the starting bracket, and then it will just change it for you. Of course, in Kotlin is like trying to specify the type here, but that's not really necessary, so you can just remove it, or you can be explicit if you want. Usually it's good if you're explicit. But as you can see, this is really nice, like one function in one line. So it's actually like recommended if you have like very simple function, just do like this. So just to recap everything, we learned how to use functions. Of course, you can actually simplify this one. There is a shortcut in IntelliJ, and then you can inline variables. And then I'm just gonna clean up the code a little bit. So what you learned today, that you can create new functions, how to use parameters, what are the default ones, and what are the named ones also. I hope you like this episode, and probably in the next episode we're gonna learn about classes. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.